How's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. Back to do another read along for tonight. Beguile. Book 3, Chapter 9 When Love Dies Twice. In the village at their home together, Celeste was preparing for her day at Terramore House. She poured herself coffee and watched as the milk she added swirled around in clumps of caramel colored clouds. The baby in her stomach jumped. She felt it so strong. It made her smile that this new life, now as in eighth month, was so lively and wild inside of her. She looked down and saw the fabric of her dress move with the baby movements. She smiled again and tasted her coffee happily. You in good spirits this morning, Philippe said, setting his belongings down on the side table near the entrance to the kitchen and walking over to kiss her. He was dressed cleanly in tight white shirt and bow tie. He fastened the suspenders that held his pants and the waist with their gold buckles and kissed Celeste on the lips. She seemed distant all of a sudden. Her lives were burning in her mind. Even in her quiet, happy moments, the second she saw Philip's face, she remembered how she was misleading him about the child inside of her. Are you okay? He asked. Fine, she replied shortly. Celeste Philip sighed. I think we should talk about your work with Charlotte and what's been happening at the house. And between us. Between us, Celeste asked, feeling the fear of what that meant. Yes, you can't deny that we've been very distant from each other. Our whole relationship has been, I don't know, frozen or something. I barely see you anymore. You barely see me anymore. You're almost always at Terramore. I don't know that I can say I like that. When you first started there, I felt comfortable, but things have changed, and the idea that you're around Jacob all day and come into contact with Sebastian potentially, I can't say that I feel as comfortable as I did at the start, he confessed as he grabbed her free hand, squeezing it tightly. She released his hand. What are you saying? That I stop working at Charlotte's governess? I can't do that, Celeste said. What? Why not? He wondered. Celeste couldn't tell him him everything. But the truth was she feared what would become of her if she decided to end her job. Jacob could use what he had on her again. The secret of her mother's affair with his father, something that would truly ruin her family's food reputation in the village, a reputation they had all worked and strived all their lives to protect and keep in good standing. This notion of a good reputation seemed odd by many standards, but to Celeste, family living in a family of Africa and Portuguese descent, in a time where families like hers were not in the circles that her family rose to with their good reputation, was what Celeste and her lives were protecting. Jacob would surely see her leaving her post as his daughter's governess as a slap to the face. She feared his backlash more than she feared Philip's. I can't stand, I just can't, Philip. The Lords have provided so much for us. I can't just leave right now. Charlotte, too, she needs me, Celeste added. Needs you? You need to rest. You're having our child. You're up there all day. You sometimes don't even come home to sleep. I miss you. I miss us. Our child is coming, and I think Georgina could cover for you, at least for a bit, Philip offered. No, Celeste replied straightforwardly. No, Celeste, the baby will. What about time to recuperate after the baby? Added. Philippe, I just think she paused. She felt cornered. The truth had to come out. The truth was the best for her to finally free herself of this awful covering. She could no longer lie to the man she loved, but it was going to hurt. It was going to hurt him and her and so many of the people that loved them together. But she could not allow him to continue to believe the baby was his. "What is it?" he asked as she froze in silence. "I'm going to say something to you now that is going to ruin what we have, and to be honest, it's for the best, for your best. You deserve better, and I have been hiding something from you, and I can no longer hide it. This is gutting me, Philip. It's gutting me. The child I am carrying is not yours. It's Jacob's. I lied. I've been lying, Philip. I am sorry," she confessed as she grabbed onto his hands. He pulled away, his face scorned, hurt, crushed. "You're sorry? You've been lying to me for months about something so personal and so important, and I've been running around like a fool, like a goddamn fool. You and Jacob. When? Why? Why would you do that to us? To me? We've we've been together for 15 years, and now you've just thrown that all away," Philip replied in the most hurt and broken tone a voice Celeste had ever heard. "I can't get into why. It was a mistake. It was," he interrupted her. "A mistake that is too late to say. You should have thought about what a mistake I would have been the moment you decided to lay with this man, a man that has taken so much from me," Philip said, raising his crippled hand from the accident her was in with he was in with Jacob so many years ago when he worked as Jacob's personal page as a teenager. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she said, crying and holding onto her baby bump. Philip's heart shattered in his chest. It was all such a shocking moment in his life. Something so vile and destructive done to him by the woman he loved. "Here," he said to her, handing her a telegram. She took it, hand shaking as she grabbed it onto the paper. "It's from your brother. Maybe you should respond with the news of your betrayal. I'm sure that'll be less shocking to him than knowing he's Albert Lord's bastard child," Philip said, revealing he knew the Devani family secret from the files Gregory Rains had accumulated on them. Celeste's eyes widened with shock. "How do you know that?" she asked, ripping open the telegram and reading her brother's response to her earlier note from weeks ago. "I guess we all have secrets," Philip replied, passively aggressive. "Philip, listen to me," she began before being interrupted. "I think you should leave. Leave now," he said, turning his back to her on her. But she began. "Leave this home. I don't think I can look at you right now," Philip replied as he turned to the window, letting the morning sun warm his broken heart. Celeste nodded that she had to tell him the truth. She knew in her own broken heart that it had to happen, that the baby needed to be born into the truth and the lie she was spinning to protect herself and the secrets Jacob had held over her head. She grabbed a bag that she always packed that had a few of her things that she would take up to Terramore. It would only last for a few days. "I'll come back for more things when you're away," she said softly in the front door. He turned to her, his face trembling with tears. He could not believe the woman he loved had done this to him. To them, he could not believe she was leaving. He could not believe he had sent her away. He could not believe the child was the man who had done so many terrible things. It was so unlike her. It was such a departure from who Celeste really was. "Who are you?" he asked, devastated and broken. She looked at him, dead in the eye, and answered, "I don't know any more. But I do love you. I will always love you." He shook his head, but did not answer. Then, with no more look around her small one more look around her small home she had spent so many years and love and happiness with Philip Braga, and left. As she got into the waiting car where Hampstead had come to take her back to Terramore for her day of work and service as governess, Celeste sobbed. Miss, has something happened? Hampstead asked, looking at Celeste in the tiny rearview mirror. She shook her head no, a clear lie, but if there was anything Hampstead knew, it wasn't to never butt in things that had nothing to do with him. He took her reply for its face value, although it pained him to see her so sad. But I just lose my place. Seriously, I will seriously kick myself hard here. Okay, Philip, for his part, watched as Hampstead drove off. From his sheer curtain-covered window, the tears she was gone from their small home, the love of his life, forever. A bustling village of Welshport seemed to never have an idea of what had happened just the night before over in the woods. The dark secrets that seep beneath the veneer of the Lord family facade was always something gossiped about and spooky. In smoky corners of the Siren's Call pub or the underpersonals in Village Park by some of our other well-to-do ladies of the island, as horse-drawn carriages mixed with the newest automobiles in the village. Evie Jordan Lord and Matthew Winterbourne mixed in with the citizens as they got out of the carriage, made their way into town hall. Evie, dressed in head to toe black crowned, with a black veil covering her saddened face, was helped down from the carriage by the handsome Matthew. They went arm in arm into the records hall. She was playing the grieving widow once again, and this time her heart felt something lived for the death of her husband, or at least the creature that had taken over her husband's body. The pair walked into the large hall, its long white walls covered in paintings of the mayors and governors of the past, like tiny museum of portraits, faces that were worn with a century of secrets of what they had done to Matthew's people. As they continued to the clerk's desk, Matthew couldn't help but look up at the portraits of Welshport ghastly forefathers and feel if their eyes were following him like they knew who he was, like they knew he had survived despite all their attempts and exhaustion, his people from the face of the earth, extinguishing his people from the face of the earth. He wanted to spit on them, a sign of disgust, but he kept his composure for the grieving Evie. Afternoon, how may I help you? The clerk at the desk did not recognize the well-known Lord Bride. Evie. Afternoon, sir. I'm here to file a death certificate for my husband, Evie replied. Oh, I am so sorry for your loss, ma'am. Such a young widow. Oh, let me see here, he said, scouring the various forms in his cubby. Ah, here we go. You'll have to place the date of the funeral here, and the date of the death here, and of course the name of the deceased, he added. Oh, there was no funeral, Matthew said. No funeral? How can that be? The clerk replied. It was a personal decision because of unimaginable circumstances. You see, my husband was Mr. Sebastian Lord, and I am sure you've heard that he's been under a lot of pressure since his return. Life since his kidnapping had not been good. Kidnappers had not been good to him. He took his own life, Evie said, lying about Sebastian's death, and showed the form to the clerk showing whom she was filing a certificate the deceased was. All the clerk said, recognizing the name Evie had written down. Well, I can understand the secrecy. I've heard the terrible things that happened to Mr. Lord, the clerk whispered to keep discretion. I thought he was doing well after he came back. I had no idea he was ill. disease of the mind can do such a terrible thing. He added, no, starting to get confused about the whole situation. Yes, that's right, an illness of the mind. It can happen to us all. Of all, the trauma is profound enough. Evie explained, my poor husband suffered a great deal since he returned from his kidnapping. He, uh, he just never was the same. Unfortunately, he departed us in a way that I and the entire Lord family prefer not to disclose to the public. You can understand, can't you, sir? Evie said, invoking the powerful clout of the Lord name into the fray and lie of the kidnapping they had used to cover for the truth of Sebastian's return from the dead. The clerk thought for a second. He wasn't sure exactly how to proceed, but he knew that there had to be a way to keep both parties happy. The county in which they lived would most certainly need proof of death. A coroner's report usually, but this was the Lord family after all. They had the entire island under their thumb, and for the most part had so many people employed in the various business ventures they had around the village, not including their main source of income, the giant publishing dynasty they held in Maine, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and New York. You know what? Just fill out this section and I'll take care of the rest, the clerk whispered. Evie smiled and mouthed the words thank you and filled in what the clerk asked. She signed the form and the clerk stamped his approval of the death certificate. Evie was now a widow for the second time, officially and legally. The family will truly be appreciative of this. Truly, Evie said with a sad smile. As she looked down at her copy, she felt her heart skip. She was happy that it was over, and that Sebastian, who was suffering in the state he was in, was now at peace. She could move on with her life now that he was really gone. It was meant to be. Matthew said as the two made their way out of the building, he wasn't meant to come back the way he did, not at all. Matthew, thank you for coming with me. I don't know who else to turn to. Nikki is very involved with your sister. While she rests and Celeste has a lot of going on, I really had no one else. This means so much to me, Evie said, as the sound of the horses galloping around them on the cobblestone streets behind her. I wouldn't want it any other way. I really mean that, he said, his deep brown eyes growing warmer by the second. Now we have to get to the publishing house. Lords have a lot of weight when it comes to what goes on into the papers. I'll have to get Sebastian's death published to solidify everything. It's strange, isn't it? He came back and I was happy to get a second chance. But now I can only think of making sure everyone who needs to know he's finally gone knows, Evie said, thinking of the irony of her life. You really did love him, didn't you? Matthew said. And I still do. But not this Sebastian, not the man that came back. That wasn't who I fell in love with. That man died when Mary shot him the first time. The man I loved would have never came after my brother that way. He would have never tried to kill Nicky. No, that was not Sebastian, not in any way, shape, or form, Evie explained as she pulled out the instructions for the newspapers the Lords owned to publish Sebastian's second death. I know what you mean. I would do anything for my sister. Anything, we only have each other, so I'd protect her life with mine any day of the week. What you did took an immeasurable amount of guts, Evie. You have no idea how proud of you I am, Matthew said. Evie sighed. Still, I keep going over and over what happened in my head. I cannot believe I did that. I keep telling myself it was to keep Nick safe, but at the end of the day, I still took Sebastian's life. How will Rebecca and Charlotte and any of the lords ever look at me the same again? She wondered of her new-found family. Evie, they knew what he was. They were reluctant to even welcome him back like you did. They'll understand, especially because I bet they felt the same way you did. That person was not Sebastian. He just wasn't, Matthew said, trying to make Evie feel better. Then she looked up at Matthew, who was standing by her like a guard. She smiled and felt so close to him now. She could feel he was a true friend, a true-hearted person who only wanted what was best for her, and she knew then that could not, that she could confide in him. There's something else, she said, pausing. Are you okay? He asked. I have to tell you something. I've been keeping it from everyone. Just feels like I need to tell you because I don't know. I don't feel like I'm being completely honest at this point, and I shouldn't be keeping this a secret. It doesn't feel right, Evie said. Matthew's face frowned with worry. Evie, what is it? Sebastian and I, before he died, we conceived the child. I'm pregnant, and I haven't told the family yet. I mean, the idea of what they'll think once they realize what's happened will be just one more battle with those walls, and I just don't know how it's going to turn out, especially now that Rebecca is in such turmoil and Jacob's return. It's all so much for us to deal with, she added with tears in her eyes. Do not worry. I won't let you deal with all this alone. And what it's worth, I think they'll feel just as relieved as you did now that Sebastian has found his way back to the other side. Rebecca will survive her own drama, as she always does. Word is she already been released. Rains found someone else more lucrative to go after for the shooting, Matthew revealed. Who? Not Celeste, I hope. Evie replied, Matthew shrugged as he grabbed hold of her hand and squeezed. She felt safe with him, safer than she had ever felt in the entire time she lived on the mysterious island. No, not Celeste, a voice said coming from around the corner. It was Philip Braga heading for the jailhouse. As his shift was about to begin, Evie exclaimed, hugging her friend tightly. What happened? Who has Rains gone after? Philip shook his head, unable to reveal more about the case, but wondered what they were doing at the Hall of Records. Evie looked at Matthew, who lifted his brows almost as if to say he had no idea how she would explain this to Philip, who was the only person of the law but one of Sebastian's friends and aliases. It's Sebastian. He died last night, she said, expecting an avalanche of questions. Philip stood there and looked at Evie, who he could clearly see was dressed in mourner's black. It didn't even faze him to ask her more questions. It didn't even faze him to care that another of his childhood friends was dead. All he could think about was Celeste and what she told him just the night before, the same night Sebastian supposedly died. Are you going to say anything? Matthew wondered, seeing how strange it was for Philip to say nothing. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss, obviously. I'm a bit confused at how it all happened. He had, as you know, what we all thought an immortal soul. So, how can that be? Philip questioned. I wish I could go into all the details, Philip. I really do. But the village ears are always listening. I can't go into all the horrible information right now, but you, more than anyone else, know that Sebastian was no longer the man we all knew and loved. The man died at our wedding a year ago, and that monster that replaced him died last night, Evie explained. I've been so very preoccupied, Evie. You'll have to forgive me for not being there for you, to protect you, to help you, he said, grabbing her hand. I understand. But I've had help, Evie said, smiling as she looked over at Matthew. What is it? What's been bothering you? She asked. It's Celeste and I. We're no longer together. I assume you'll be seeing her at Terramore much more than just during the day. She's moved there permanently, he explained. Evie, of course, already knew that Celeste was expecting Jacob's child. That was a secret she had promised to keep for several weeks now, but she had no idea it would have gotten to this. Of course, she was broken hearted for Philip, but at the same time, she felt similarly for her best friend Celeste, who was now free of her for her secrets, just as Evie now was now free of hers. Looks like we're all turning the page on our last lives, my friend. Understand that. I'll do anything to make sure Celeste is safe in that house. She's been nothing but good to me, and she's shown me so much compassion and friendship. I'll do the same for you. You've been there so much that I think we need this new lease on life, no matter how painful it really is, Evie said. Very wise words. Thank you, Philip replied, and Sebastian, I'm still confused about that. I spoke to him not too long ago, and Philip paused, feeling the scar of his wrist from Sebastian's wife. He seemed fine. Evie took a breath, her chest heaving heavily inside the tight corset inside her petticoat. She wasn't even sure how to begin telling Philip about what happened the night Alice, Nick, and Matthew went to Lockwood Thicket and what that she found when she entered. But if anyone could understand, it could be Philip. But she relented. She needed to keep the story straight. After all, Philip was a deputy of the law. Everything that she spoke of going forward when it came to Sebastian and his death needed to stay the same as she told to others. It was unexpected, as you might imagine, but sometimes that is how death is. He was cremated, and now we're going to spread his ashes today. His darkness is now over. He's back where he belongs in heaven, she said, with real tears in her eyes. Philip looked at her and wondered how it could have happened, but understanding the strange circumstances of Sebastian, existence as it was. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't explain the way he came back to life, and certainly wasn't going to try to make sense of his sudden death a second time in a way. Sebastian's second death was a good godsend to them all, and Philip couldn't go further into it for his own sanity. Yeah, I was going to say, hey, Philip, you don't have to be anyone's meal anymore. Anyway, as for Sebastian being in heaven, Philip privately had his doubts. Sebastian's dark side was literally a scar on Philip's arm and in his blood. My condolences to the family. I hope wherever Sebastian is now, he's found peace. That's what he was missing all this time. Peace, Philip said as he then excused himself to them both and he headed down to work. Oh, Evie, he added. Yes, yes. Keep an eye on Celeste, will you, for me, he added, just before turning back and walking down the street. Evie smiled at him and nodded her head. Always. Then, as Philip got smaller and smaller in the distance down the block, Matthew looped Evie's arm into his and squeezed her close. We're going to be okay. We're all going to be okay, he said, reassuring her. She then opened a small bag, clutched at her arm to reveal a small golden urn that had what were Sebastian's ashes of what his body had turned into once she staked him in the chest. Let's take them to the sea, she said, referring to where they spread the to Sebastian's ashes. Celeste carefully folded her clothes in her new permanent room to the mansion with a helpful Terramore housemaid. She looked at each of her times and could remember the last time she wore them. Good times, times with Philip and all their happiness together. This one is beautiful, the maid said, handing a long plum colored dress with matching overcoat that went from shoulder to hem. Celeste smiled. May I? Jacob asked, still leaning on hospital crutches at the room's door, with the newspaper tucked under his arm. Jane, the maid, curtsied and excused herself from the room, leaving Jacob and Celeste to their privacy. As the maid passed Jacob, he entered the and turned to close the bedroom door, leaving it open. The 8-month pregnant Celeste said with trepidation. Jacob seemed surprised, but understood her hesitation, being alone. Well, you won't be the only woman in the mansion who doesn't want to be seen or alone with me. He joked. My mother returned last night. She thinks I don't know she's home, but the walls at Terramore aren't as thick as she thinks. It seems Constable Rance has bigger fish to fry in my attempted murder. Or Celeste arrested, asserted. Rebecca didn't do it, and you lied. Correct? You did. It was you, Jacob replied quickly. But how could I let you, the mother of my unborn child, go to jail? I had to think quickly and blame Rebecca. No matter what you did to me, I would never let Rains take you. You're insane. I didn't shoot you, Jacob. I didn't shoot you or Christian. He was my friend. I cared for him, and even though you've done nothing but cruel things to me, I would never try to take your life, Celeste replied. Jacob could sense she was telling the truth. Her assertive voice, her eyes never blinked. Then she spoke. She never turned away to hide a tale of a misleading person. No, Celeste was indeed telling the truth. No one knew the truth. No one knew it was really the hunters summoned by Eliza who came to try to take Jacob and Christian's lives. I I have made a mistake, Jacob said, shrugging his shoulders carelessly. It doesn't matter now. I've made it better. I called up the Globe and it has them write something about her arrest, he said. Baxter Murphy's article in the paper today was because of you. It doesn't really make you out to be a hero, Celeste replied. Yes, well, I guess I have made another mistake. Agreed after this gathering article in the newspaper portrayed Jacob as having an axe to grind, accusing his mother of attempted murder. I'm sure you did, Celeste replied, knowing Jacob for a schemer. Celeste aside, from all I've done, I do want to make sure you are happy here. This could be your home now, too. I know that things are different than what they were only a few months ago, but you're still carrying my child, and I want to make you feel safe here. Safe for as long as you want to stay, Phillips. Will just have to understand. Jacob replied, moving past the topic of Rebecca and her false arrest. Celeste paused, her heart shattering at Philip's name. Philip will no longer be an issue. All, Jacob replied softly, attempting to hide his glee at her insinuation at the breakup. I'm here for one thing, and only one thing, and that's Charlotte. I will do what I can to continue to provide for her what Rebecca hired me for. And that's all, Celeste said. Well, we'll up your pay, Jacob offered. After all, you're carrying the heir to the dynasty now, he said. She turned to him, unsure of what he meant. The heir, Sebastian? Sebastian was the heir. I don't understand, she said, putting down the set of scarves she was wearing. My spies in the village told me that Evangeline was just down at the Hall of Records filing Sebastian's death certificate. I don't know the details yet, but apparently he's dead gone. For the good this time, Jacob replied, shocking Celeste, who had no idea. What? Sebastian's dead? Celeste replied in shock. How could she not tell any of us? Oh, don't be coy, Celeste. You know he was a menace to us all. How he was. Perhaps she didn't want to burden us any more with his how does Evie put it? Oh yes, his affliction, Jacob replied. Celeste rolled her eyes at him, knowing exactly what he meant. You seem obviously broken up, she said sarcastically. Jacob shrugged. That creature was not my nephew. Well, you of all people would know the difference between a monster and a man, wouldn't you? I'll have to send my regards to Evie. She must be devastated. I'm sure the family will keep her financially secure, Celeste asked as she sat on a bed, letting her long flowery dress tumble as she did. What do you care about Evie and her future here? Jacob sincerely wondered. Jacob, unlike you, I have a heart, and Evie is my best friend. We've obviously been going through our own issue lately, and I love her and hope for the best for her. I hope you would too after what you've been through, but perhaps being on death's door still won't shake you, Celeste replied, shaking her head. Jacob fell more in love with Celeste than in that moment. Her kindness in such a trembling time in her own life shined like the Morgan Lighthouse in the south shore of Welshport. To think of Evie's before her own needs was a sparkle in the crown she already wore in Jacob's eyes. Of course, he replied, Evie is family. And Celeste, you know, there are things we can do to make sure you are also kept financially sound too. And at this time, we can solidify this child's place in the family inheritance, should it be a boy or even a girl. I would greatly hope you would consider this offer, Celeste, Jacob said cryptically. She turned to him, her skin glistening like a caramel candy, perfectly golden and warm, her eyes deep oceans of chestnut that filled with water. She knew what he was asking. She knew she had to take him up on the offer, especially because she was with child. If she wanted any sort of future, she had to take him up on he was about what was about to come next. Be my wife. Be Mrs. Jacob Lord, and I promise you all the best things will come for you. And this child, Charlotte, already loves you. She sees you as such supporting, loving figure, Celeste, and even I care for you deeply, Jacob said, stunning Celeste with his words that came from his lips, as sincere as they could from a man known for telling every lie in the book to get what he wanted. Celeste thought of her late mother, Christina, and how her affair with Albert Lord produced a child that had to live in the shadows so that Rebecca could never find out. The shock, the scandal, the terrible things a jilted Rebecca could and would do to that child were a source of great fear in Christina's heart and mind. Celeste knew this and could not do that to her unborn baby, what her mother did to Jonathan Devaney, the son she had with Albert Lord, making him Celeste and Jacob's half brother. Celeste could not raise her child as Jacob's bastard. She took a breath, deep breaths, in and out. Her heart was pounding like a drum. She could not believe the words that came out of her mouth next. She never thought she'd hear herself say, I will be your wife, Jacob. I will, but we have to wait to be married until my brother Jonathan arrives, she said. I want him to be here and be a part of my life fully now, not like before, she requested. Oh, very well. I will make arrangements for our brother as well, Jacob, or for your, said smirking, reminding Celeste that he knew the truth about Jonathan too. After all, It was the source material for Jacob's blackmail and the cause for her to go to bed with him. As Jacob left his leg crutches banging about as he left, Celeste stood up from her bed and looked out at the window and watched the dust begin to flood the sky over the island. From her second-story bedroom window, her eyes burst in a river of tears as she turned and fell face first into her mattress and cried herself to sleep. The sun had set, but still showed a glimmer of large light over the hills of the island and paused the small Frenchman waterway that separated Welshport from Maine on a green hillside with small fall daisies growing out of the ground on a patchwork of gray plots nearly lined in perfect rows stood Dr. Andrew Kim. His coat swayed in the light evening breeze, while whips of his hair flustered under his top hat as he stood over a grave dusted with debris from the nearby pine trees. Kim had returned from a trip out of town to clear his head. He had suffered so much over the past few weeks, and he was hoping that he'd find some solace away from the island, but he found nothing of the sort. His demons followed him, and they followed him wherever he went. Here, at St. Termore Cemetery, is where he found some sort of peace. He knelt down and dusted off the large gravestone that had the name Dr. Michael Daphne, his late husband, the man and source of the blackmail Jacob had on him. God, I wish you were here, handsome Andrew told the grave. You tell me what I needed to do next, he added, as the trees swayed in the wind, creating a rattling sound of branches that gave Andrew chills up his spine. Andrew once again said goodbye to his husband and made his way towards the large iron gate of the cemetery. He paused. A thick-walled and ebony-decorated mausoleum that belonged to the Lord family. The iron gates of the entrance were chained shut, locked from public view. But something sparkled Andrew's curiosity. Although there was a fresh wreath of roses laid on a large plaque that had all the names of the people laid to rest inside the family mausoleum engraved on it. Andrew looked at the wreath. It was beautifully made. The roses were so dark and scarlet red, and they could have been painted in red. A thick black ribbon was tied at the bottom of the wreath. Andrew looked around the cemetery. He was alone. If you didn't count the spirits that mostly likely floated around him invisible to the eye. This wreath, he thought, could not have been here for very long. In fact, he didn't notice it when he passed, but on his way to Michael's grave. Andrew lifted the wreath and saw the name of the plaque of those inside. But one name stood out due to the date of the death: Sabrina Spencer Lord. It was the anniversary of her death that very day. Someone had come to bring her these flowers, but did not go inside the vault of the family's remains. Andrew could only imagine which one of the lords did, especially. Then a voice came from behind Andrew. I finally found you, the woman's voice said. Andrew jumped out of his skin with a surprise. He turned to see his former nurse, Ashia Hoffman. Sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. Standing in the damp grass and wind, swift commentary, with a coat of thick wool that covered her whole body. She seemed tired, exhausted even. He didn't. He hadn't seen her in months, and they left on uncertain terms when she discovered and aided his horrible brainwashing of Christian Evans. Ashia, my God, what are you doing up here? He asked her, stepping closer to see her face better in the dimming light of the day. I've been trying to find you for weeks. I couldn't. I searched and asked around town and even on the mainland. No one could find you, she said. I had to leave for a while, he replied, somewhat embarrassed, but what she knew he had done, the feeling of self disgusting about his horrible history, of remind controlling his patience weighing heavily on his mind. How did you know to find me here? Something told me to come here. I guess it was my own intuition, she said, as she shivered in the cold. Andrew lifted a brow. What do you want from me? If it's money, I can have the rest of your pay sent to where you live. I apologize for not paying you before I left, he replied. It's not that. There is something you need to know, something I've done that I think may be a turning point in your life. I don't even know why I did it. Perhaps I felt some sort of loyalty to you now that I know everything about you, she said. Something to show me? What are you talking about? He wondered. You have to come with me. I will show you, she replied. Go with you? Go where? He asked as she stood now in complete darkness now that the sun had dipped below the hill, shadowing all that had no light. Andrew lit a match and picked up the lantern he had brought with him for this very reason. The light illuminated his face, his extended his arm, and the lantern would shine on her shield too. She was there, still, her face cold with the autumn wind kissing her tan East Asian skin. Just come with me, please, she replied. Andrew had no need to fear her. So he thought, and had no history of feeling as though she was untrustworthy. Andrew followed his former Wincliffe nurse to her home, past the village, where inside was a vat filled with preserved liquid that Ashia had smuggled out of Wincliffe. And inside this tan vat, which in reality was that Ashia had taken from a local farm and filled it with preservative was the preserved body of the supposed dead Christian Evans. Asha had taken him from the morgue, kept his tissue alive and healthy, and saved his body for Andrew. Oh shit. As Ashia and Andrew made their way through the village to her home, another larger group of citizens had gathered at the Siren's Call pub for the evening liberations. There was chatter and table games mixed with either a beer and liquor pouring down every smiling face as the townspeople enjoyed their night. Gregory Rains burst in. Forget to assemble the mob. He needed to take down his long and looted enemy, Eliza Good, the Witch of Welshport. What are you doing here, Rains? A man said, holding up a beer to his lips as the fourth form, the head kissed his mustache. Looking rather peaked there, Constable. What's the matter? The young bartender asked, passing Rains a free beer. The noise in the room ceased. Everyone turned to the new constable who was sweating, so eager to get his revenge on the witch that got away so long ago, and that so easily fell back onto his lap. It was destiny. Rains could taste it. As the crowd waited for the answers, he could see through the pub's checkered windows the spinning beam of light from the Welshport's lighthouse in the distance. It flashed its light out to the sea, and then over Welshport, then back over to the sea and over Good Island, then back around again and again. Its spinning beam of light beaconed to all those who came to ashore. Rain stood in the center of the pub to go to so that all the attention was on him for from the 30 or 40 people he was able to lure to the shoreline. Friends, fellow Welshportians, just beyond this door, through the village and beyond Morgan Lighthouse, sitting alone in her hovel of a cabin where she has no doubt converts our lives and curses us to, is a witch, a real life witch, who has lived in freedom on that little island named after her for decades. She is a daughter of darkness and a sister of evil. This woman, this creature, needs to be brought to justice tonight, Rains exclaimed. The crowd looked around, confused, baffled, and some even giggled and chuckled at him. What have you been drinking, man? One shouted. Too many days on the island. Okay, now where was I? Too many days on the island. Go back to Boston, another joke. Give me what he's got, Patrick. A old ha of a woman said to the young bartender. Bad shit, man. I say another man. The crowd murmured. They had. No, no, I am not the one who's mad here. No, Rains began. All of you might have been think of your own lives and the terrible things that might have happened. Think of this island, your home, and all the tragedy that you and your ancestors might have faced over the years. Think of the deaths. Think of the loss. Think of all you might have had you not lived so close to a wicked bride of the Satan. Think of all of this and question my madness, Rains at it. The crowd murmured. They had suffered all in different ways. They all had seen darkness in their own lives, many deaths, many losses, many hurt lives suffering for decades. But none of this was Eliza's fault. In truth, none of this was due to her witchcraft. It all had to do with the ancestors of those who were killed for the island had to be stolen. The Damien people, Alice and Matthew's people, had cursed the first settlers for all time for stealing their land, killing their people, and warping the truth of where they came from. Eliza, this time, was innocent. But they didn't. That didn't matter now. Rains had been successful. He had turned the tide of the audience. They were now on his side, thinking of their struggles and their pains and the loss in their lives. Maybe he's right, a person said. Does it make sense? It sort of does, a man answered. I lost my wife. The neighbors, too, their home burnt down, a man cried. Maybe it was a witch. We're cursed, a person shouted. She cursed us, the drunk old woman screamed from her bar seat. What do we do? A man asked. What we do? We? Why should she do this? How do we stop the witch? A man shouted to. Come with me. Come with me to her island home, to where she dwells, a hermit in this world. Come with me. Grab your boats. Load them with yourselves, and we will all go to the island. Take her from where there and bring her back to Welshport and show her finally, once and for all, what it is to see justice. We all free ourselves from this witch's curse, Rain screamed. Free ourselves, they shouted over and over again in the dark under the orange light of their lanterns and torches. And they did, as Rain said, loaded themselves, men and women, and head off to drag the witch off Good Island to Welshport to face her justice, Rebecca. Rebecca had been successful in getting revenge on Eliza for what she did to her baby and to Sebastian. Now Eliza's life would be on the line. She had given up her freedom for her powers. She was not allowed to leave Good Island. Her life, her powers, her world was now on the edge of disaster. Okay, guys, that's the read along. Really, really, really good. Obviously, link will be in the description. I'm going to read the other one a little later tonight, so I get myself caught up here. So again, really, really good. Holy crap, that was. I really like the fact that I was saving the photo. Um, I like the fact that you're getting a lot of closure on certain, like not so much, well, not so much closure, but I stopping at certain things, like with fully, like he hasn't, he says he's moved on from Celeste, but he really hasn't. He's gonna have Evie keep an eye on her and sort of spy on her, you know, which is gonna be interesting. But really, really good. Link will be in the description box to Benight and Beguile. Go check it out. Really, really good. I'll see you guys later tonight.